Very often, students are asked to memorize the quadratic formula in the form x equals negative b plus and minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. But it might be actually more useful and easier to memorize it in the form of x equals negative b over 2a plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, so let's forget about this form. We're only gonna focus on this one. This might look harder, but actually it gives you much more information about your solution and the graph of your equation. For example, let's consider an equation y equals x squared plus 4x minus 5. We know that this will be our a, this will be our b, and this will be our c. Now, if we look at the first part of the equation, negative b over 2a, this part of the equation indicates the line of symmetry of our parabola. So by looking at this part, we know where the line of symmetry will go, and the line of symmetry, for those of you who might not know, is we can say it's the imaginary line where you could fold the image in half and have both halves actually match exactly. This already might give you some idea of how the graph looks. So let's look at our example. We're going to take the first part of the equation, which is going to plug in our values. So for b, we have negative 4 over 2 times a, which is 1. That gives us negative 4 over 2, which is negative 2. Okay, so we have negative 2. This tells us that the line of symmetry goes through x equals negative 2, and this also gives us the x-coordinate of the vertex, which is the lowest point of the parabola. And now if we would like to find the y-coordinate of the vertex, all we need to do is just take the x and plug it back to our equation, so it will be negative 9. So we have the point negative 2, negative 9, which is our vertex, and which shows us the line of symmetry. So, okay, I drew already the point negative 2, negative 9. We go negative 2, negative 9. Over here is the line of symmetry. We already have some kind of idea of how our parabola might look like. We know that the lowest point will be located right over here. Okay, now if we look at the next portion of the equation and we look only at the radical part of the formula, which is square root of b squared minus 4ac. This is very useful when calculated by itself because it indicates the number of zeros the parabola will have. So if, for example, we have that the square root of b squared minus 4ac will be positive, that will let us know that there will be 2 solutions. In other words, 2 x-intercepts. Okay, now if the square root will equal to 0, that means that there will be 1 solution. If the square root will be negative, that means that there are no solutions. Therefore, just by calculating the radical part of the equation, we can immediately tell if the quadratic equation will have solutions and how many. So going back to our example, which was y equals x squared plus 4x minus 5, I'm only going to calculate the radical part. So we know that a was 1, b was 4, and c was negative 5. I'm only taking the radical part, b squared minus 4 ac, and I'm going to plug in my values. I have the square root of b squared, which is 4 squared, minus 4 times a, which was 1, times c, which was negative 5, which equals 6. Since 6 is a positive number, then we know that we will have two solutions. Okay? Now, we calculated before that the first part of the equation was equal to negative 2, and we calculated that the radical part of the equation equals 6. So now, looking back at our quadratic formula, we have x equals the first part, which is negative 2, just going to plug that in, plus or minus the radical part was equal to 6, therefore I'm going to put 6 over the remaining part of the formula, which is 2a. All we need to do now is solve for x. So from this we get two equations. Now solving for those, x equals 1, and over here we have x equals negative 5. That verifies what we have said before. We know that this was positive, therefore we must have two solutions. This is one of the solutions. This is the next solution. Okay, now if we would like to plug those back in, we have our two solutions. If we try to draw the parabola, it will look something like this. This is our parabola. Now it is more useful to memorize the quadratic formula as x equals negative b over 2a plus and minus square root of 2b squared minus 4ac over 2a, because it gives you the line of symmetry, which in our case was negative 2. And it also gives you an idea of how many solutions you will be looking for.